bark softly tales, dreamy summer bites, flashes of horror and suspense. Bite back at the fear.
Scars by Mav Sky. Scar was but a tall shadow in whispers. Lucy stood in the barn, watching his shadow while she drank wine and smoked a cigarette. The shadow's whispers pricked her ears. Lucy didn't understand what Scar's deep whispers said, but they were comforting, intoxicating. His whispers grew louder, as they always did, giving his voice substance. The softness and depth dazzled her senses. She placed the black silk blindfold on as he asked, and let him lead her to the cornfield. They lay side by side on a soft blanket. Lucy imagined the moon drifting in and out of clouds as she listened. He spun his words like spider webs, and they floated and drifted like silk in her mind, to her heart. "Scar," Lucy said, closing her eyes within the blindfold. "Why are you here? Why have you been visiting me all these nights?" "I don't know if you're ready to hear that, Lucy." The very way he said this made her body warm like it never did for her husband Luke. Luke, who lounged on the couch munching potato chips and slurping beer as if there'd be no football tomorrow. Luke, who tinkered in the barn on the old Ford truck that never had work to begin with when the crops needed to be tended. She had plowed the fields, sown the corn, and weeded the rows all by herself this year. The days of the final harvest drew near, and her back ached even now from the hard work. "You have no idea how ready I am." She hinted at the true meaning with a fluctuation of her voice, although she had never seen his face. Skin, she imagined Scar's body tanned, muscled, exquisite, cultured. Lucy ached for him to touch her once. Just once would be ecstasy. Anything more, nirvana. Scar chuckled, his voice low, gravelly, cruel. Lucy blushed. She had said too much, and then she felt angry. Wasn't this what he had wanted all along? "Your laughter mocks me." It did, and yet she still craved it. "Lucy, my dear, remember now." She remembered everything he had ever said. "Remember when we first met 2 weeks ago?" "How could I forget, Scar?" Lucy smiled, anger forgotten. "I saw your shadow beside the barn. And when you spoke to me," she trailed off with a memory. "I left you the silk scarf. Do you remember why?" "You asked me if I like the dark, and I said yes. So you told me to close my eyes, and you put on the blindfold." "Yes, excellent." Lucy felt a rush of warmth at these words, so she carried on with the rest. "I remember the feel of your breath on my neck as you tied the scarf around my eyes. You told me your name was Scar. You asked me if I was angry, so I told you about Luke." Scar laughed again, deeper. "And then I asked you to play a game with me. Do you remember that?" Lucy whispered, "Of course I do." She smiled and felt him lean over her, so close she could feel his heat. "I led you into the cornfield," he said, "only by the sound of your voice. And I handed you a scythe," he said. "Luke's scythe. And you told me to pour all your rage into the field. Cut, slice, hack." She had felt the scythe slice through the flesh of corn. "I did what you said. And you felt better, didn't you?" His voice poured deep and thick. "Yes?" Who knew how much money would be lost because of it? It didn't matter anymore. None of it did. Lucy knew Scar was the one she was supposed to be with all this time. "I promised to take you with me tonight, Lucy." Her breath escaped, and Lucy giggled at the thought. To be with Scar? She'd do anything. Anything. "First, we will play one more game. Just like the first night." "Anything to be with you." She reached for him, but he wasn't there. She grasped the cool autumn air. She smelled alder smoke. It warmed the night breeze. Lucy wondered where the fire came from. "Stand up, Lucy." She did, and when an object was placed in her hands, she had no doubt what it was. She recognized the feel of the long crack in the handle. The scythe. "Follow my voice." And she did. "Follow me, Lucy." His voice was straw-spun gold. The scent of smoke purged her senses, and she swore she could see firelight through the silk scarf. A muffled noise, like a scream, broke through Scar's hypnotic whisper. Perhaps it was the breeze whistling through the corn. "Stop, there." Excellent. The fire was on her right. She could definitely see it now. The muffled noise came from before her. She felt uncomfortable about it. It sounded so vaguely familiar. "Do you remember what he called your mama the last time she came to visit? The very last visit before she died? He had called her the devil's whore, hadn't he?" She nodded her head. Anger flashed in her. Lucy never had the chance to apologize. Mama's stroke took her life. "Swing." Lucy hesitated. "Swing now, Lucy." She swung. The scythe sunk into something soft. The sharpness of the blade cut through it. Cornstalks weren't soft. This felt wrong. Lucy breathed heavily. Completely wrong. "Do you remember what he did to those kittens last spring? Remember what he did when you begged him not to? He tossed them in the river. You could hear their little mews as they drowned. Couldn't you?" Lucy felt the scarf soak with tears. "Yes," she said. "Swing, Lucy." And she did, a bit surer now. The muffled noise rose again in pitch. "Do you remember when he said he was visiting the Coyers, but he came home smelling like perfume?" She nodded. His sob escaped her lips. "And when you confronted him, he told you were delusional, crazy. But then that whore later called that night, and you answered the phone. She just laughed and laughed and laughed." Lucy screamed and swung the scythe. She felt it slice through solidity. She swung again and again and again. The muffled cries drained away as she swung, cut, sliced. "Stop, Lucy." Lucy stopped. The scarf hung loosely about her eyes. She could see something hanging from the pole she'd erected weeks ago. She had stuffed hay into some of Luke's old clothes, complete with a hat, to keep the crows away. The shape she saw hanging from the pole was not her scarecrow. A cry escaped her lips. "You can look now, Lucy." She snatched the scarf away to find what her heart dreaded. Luke's eyes rolled back. His mouth draped open. Blood dribbled from his mouth into the mess of gashes she had carved into his body. "No, I didn't do that." She shook her head. "You wanted to play." Scar's voice was behind her ear. She could feel his body press against hers. When Scar's straw fingers pranced their way down her arms, she drew away, confused. Lucy turned and looked, and screamed. The straw hat covered Scar's face, the brim tucked low to his chin. A red glow came from underneath. He held a cluster of cornstalks licked with flames. "Come with me, Lucy." "No!" She turned, tripped over a log, crawled. He snatched her pants, grabbed a shoe. She screamed and kicked his straw hand away, only to look up at Luke, then to the fire lighting up the sky. "You made your choice," the scarecrow barked. Lucy jumped to her feet and ran towards the fire. It was better to die in the flames than to be consumed by the darkness of this creature. She reached for the flames. As she did, she felt the bristly arms wrap around her waist. "You made your choice, Lucy. Ha 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 ha." "No," she wept. "No, no, no." Lucy gave one more push to jump into the fire, broke free of Scar's grasp, only to have him grab her ankles. He drug her through the dirt, away from the fire. The last thing she saw was the pale body hanging from the pole. "Help me, Luke! Don't be dead!" Lucy roped her arms around the log that had tripped her, temporarily pausing Scar. Luke's body just hung there. The only sound was crimson dripping from wounds. "I didn't mean to hurt you! I didn't mean to hurt you!" Scar yanked her from the log. She dug her fingers into the ground, nails snapping. "Damn you, Luke! Help me!" Luke's screams pierced the night as a scarecrow drug her into the bowing corn and alder smoke.
Who likes dark stories? People who have experienced a touch of the dark side. People who are a little wiser to the world. People who like their bones chilled and their spines tingled. People like you and me. It's hard to find a story these days that write on the dark side with a touch of whimsy, humor, and heart. Mav Sky spreads her dark wings and solves this problem for you. Head on over to Amazon and type Mav Sky's name into the search engine. MAVSKYE. At Amazon, you'll find her Tales to Chill Your Bones series, Girl Clown Hatchet series, Supergirl series, her cult classic novel, Wanted Single Rose, and of course, her brand new release, Cold Hangs the Midnight. Choose your dark flavor and head on over to Amazon today.